Today I'm making a jetpack for my Hydra Stomper suit from Marvel's What If. For this build, I used craft foam, floor mat foam, half cylinder foam, EVA foam dowels, coffee foam, putty, super glue, hot glue, contact cement, duct tape, pool noodles, 8-inch concrete form tubes, 9-inch styrofoam half spheres, bath bomb molds, paint, a tesseract, sanding tools, safety gear, scissors, razor pens, and a box cutter. First, I started out with a concrete form tube. This is going to be the basic internal framework, just for stability. I bought 2 of them, thinking naturally, well, 2 nacelles, 2 tubes, but later realized that I only needed 1. More on that in a bit. I cut the top third off of each tube with a hand saw. My bandsaw's broken. It's hard to tell from this angle, but they're both weighted down and clamped at the ends in order to keep them from moving around on me while I work. The clamps have to be periodically retightened as I work. You can use a vise, but you'll have to put a nearly 8-inch long wooden dowel inside the tube, otherwise the vise will just crush it. Then I cut several 3-inch wide bands from a sheet of floor mat foam, which will go around the outside of the tube. I weighted the floor mats down with machinist blocks so the foam doesn't slide around while I'm working. I cut those out with a work knife, which I continually sharpened in order to keep the cut clean and uniform. Then I hot glued a band around the outside of each tube at one end. The third band is just to cut filler pieces from, since the circumference of the tubes is greater than the length of the floor mats, so they don't go all the way around. I clamped the bands down as I went in order to keep the foam pieces from peeling up, as it will take a few minutes for the hot glue to totally solidify. And there's the gap. So that's where I used the excess foam pieces. I used super glue where 2 pieces of foam contact each other just to reduce the possibility of a seam. Although I think there are seams on this. Now, see, it's in the animation, there are no seams, but on the toy, there are seams, so it's up to you. I was hoping to use this novelty milk can from a clearance aisle of a craft store for the engine nozzle, but I could only find one. So I pulled a pattern off of it using aluminum foil and duct tape. I transferred that pattern to cardboard and extended it in order to match the Stomper's nozzle length. I cut that out, then I transferred it to foam and cut the foam out. I tried to cut the bottom curve at an inward slanted angle or bevel so that it would sit flush with the nacelle housing and not have a seam that needs to be filled. That mostly worked, but I did have to even out some of the rough spots of the cut on my belt sander to make it totally flat. Then I heated it up with my heat gun, rolled it up, and placed it back inside the milk can while it cooled so that it would retain its shape. I repeated the process for the other nacelle and brought all the pieces out of the workshop and put on a respirator mask so that I could begin working with contact cement. This is the best glue for EVA foam, but you don't want to breathe it, hence all the precautions. I slathered a whole bunch of glue around the rims of both the nacelles and the nozzles, being careful to avoid any drips. Then I waited 12 minutes for the glue to become tacky, after which I connected the nozzles to the nacelle.
Okay, I'm back out here with weights.
Hey, look at this better lighting. And that's how to make it crayon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Kidding. Only kidding. While it was drying, I cut these vectoring panels that go around the nozzle. I'm tracing and cutting them from a sheet of 2mm craft foam, and then attaching them to the nozzle with super glue because it's faster, and these aren't in an area where they're going to flex, so I can get away with it here. And now for the upper portion of the engine nacelle, I took a floor tile, cut the puzzle piece tabs off, and then cut a few inches from the top and bottom of the piece in order to get the correct height. Also to avoid a little bit of sanding, otherwise I would have just cut one strip off of the top. I sanded the side edges, and then I heat formed it with my heat gun, rolled it up, and placed it inside the tube to cool. It was actually a little bit wider for it to retain a really dramatic curve, but it kind of doesn't have to. I'm just trying to reduce the stress that it's going to put on the glue while I'm gluing it to the tube. Then I hot glued it to the exterior of the tube. It still wasn't quite tall enough, so I slid it up a few inches above the top of the pipe. Okay, right there, this is where I realized that I could have gotten away with only using 1 concrete form tube instead of 2. Just by taking one and cutting it in half, and then sliding the outer panel up an additional 5 inches instead of 3. Which is frustrating, but that's, you know, a $10 mistake, and I'm sure I can find another use for those form tube offcuts. Tie wing? Y-Fighter? Anyone? Alright, forget it. Let's get back to the thing. I weighted them down with the machinist blocks while the glue cooled. Because the tube's circumference is greater than the length of the foam floor tile, there's a gap in the outer casing, which will need to be filled by an additional panel. To make that, I cut another strip of foam. The color doesn't really matter here because it's going to get painted over anyway. I heat formed it and placed it inside a smaller pipe with an even narrower cardboard poster tube in the center to press it up against the wall. After it had cooled and conformed into a curved shape, I glued it into the gap using super glue on the edges and hot glue on the side contacting the cardboard. There's supposed to be a slight gap, like a heat sink, in the outer casing between the nacelle's fuselage and the nose cone. So I made that out of another strip of 3-inch wide foam. Then I moved on to the vents. In order to get them all to be the same shape, I made a cardboard stencil first, and then traced it twice on each nacelle, but not on either side. You don't need to do it on the side that's going to be facing inward. Then I carved it out with the razor pen. I know on camera form tubes look like the same kind of cardboard at the center of a paper towel roll, but it's actually about 1,000 times denser, hence all the sawing earlier. It's very difficult to cut through. It's more like trying to cut through wood, like a weak wood, although not as weak as balsa. I'd say it's denser than balsa, of the same thickness. The point I'm trying to make here is that it's very possible that your blade could snap, so you should definitely wear safety goggles. After much frustration, I cut those out and then cut up a sheet of 4mm craft foam to use as baffles. To create a raised ridge, I used a foam bevel strip. I glued it down, chopped out the inside corners to help with the bend, and I didn't want such obvious seams, so I filled those in with putty. Next, I took a foam cylinder and chopped it up into circles to use as rivets. In the last Hydra Stomper video, I used plastic rivets, but I want to reduce the weight of the nacelle so that there's less stress on the glue seams where I'm going to attach them to the body. Plus, I'm running out of rivets. I still have to do the legs after all. Then I made a panel out of 2mm craft foam. For the raised half-circular detail, I'm using a bath bomb. Just let me get that loop out with my side cutters. There we go. I glued the panel on, then I glued the hemisphere on. It has a raised edge, so I cut a bevel in half for that and glued it in place. Then I did a quick heat treatment, which should help a little bit with the paint job, and then painted the nacelle flat black. Because this is a round surface, I have to be careful to avoid drips, which means I have to paint the upward facing surface and then wait for it to dry before rotating the whole thing and repeating the process. This is kind of a pain, but flat paint dries 1,000 times faster than any gloss paint. Seriously, with the box fan going, it's like 15 minutes. Nevertheless, while one section was drying, I attempted to make use of the time by working on other aspects of the build, such as the nose cones. These will need several layers of paint each because the top layer is going to be spray paint, and the aerosol in most spray paint will dissolve styrofoam. I also had time to build the thruster attachment pack, mostly because I already built one in the Mayfield cosplay, and then rebuilt it in an Among Us Spaceman cosplay, so this will be the third incarnation of this piece. Alright, so let's rip out all that crucial life support stuff, which I actually probably could use. That needs to be updated. And then we have a basic geometric shape. Parallelogram? No. Which I then traced onto the back of the torso. I know that edge is curved, it won't matter, trust me. Then I glued a couple of details onto the bottom of it, brought them out to the cement station, and covered it with contact cement. Today, I'm gonna show you how to make a spatula, because the glue is totally gonna destroy the sponge brush. Yeah, what'd I tell ya? When it was tacky, I contacted it and weighted it down with a metal weight. Then I made a handle by making angled cuts in a foam dowel and gluing those together to form a bend. I made attachment points out of 4mm craft foam, and after attaching them to the pack, I skewered them with toothpicks to make an even more secure attachment for the handle. By this time, the first layer of paint had dried on the nacelles. I left a patch here blank as well as a strip along the bottom because those are the areas that are going to contact the rest of the suit, so they'll be gluing surfaces, and painting over them is gonna weaken the gluing surface. Then I contact cemented the thruster nacelles to the suit. See, this is why I didn't paint the torso in the last video. So I've marked out where the edges of the torso piece are gonna need to lie, just because I know these are gonna try and move around on me.
Okay, not doing that. Just gonna try and spread that a little more. This is past its prime, so we're gonna just have to hope for the best. And that's how he died. Okay, now because this is rocking back and forth, I want to try and get to the other side to eyeball that as I go, rather than just setting it down. And now I can only weight this down so much, so I'm going to do so with just some random paint cans, glue cans and things, especially because most of the 1, 2, 3 blocks are in there. Alright.
So it was crazy windy when I built this, which I think aided in the dry time because just a few hours later I was able to start painting. And shortly after that, the spray paint was dry, so I tilted the whole structure over on its head, well, shoulders, with some metal blocks under there to keep it level, and started reinforcing the nacelles with pylons. In the show, the pylons are supposed to articulate ever so slightly. They fold back a bit, which makes sense in the story because while in flight, transporting Captain Carter, the weight distribution is totally different. Also, they could get in the way of the arms while he's on the ground fighting, but as a costume, it doesn't really make sense, and it's going to make the whole thing weaker overall. So I'm going to attach them directly to the suit and just completely ignore the articulation. I made the pylons out of scrap foam. For the hoses, I'm going to use pool noodles, which I notched and then heat glued to form a bend, and then I wrapped them in duct tape because the spray paint could potentially eat through them as well, something I discovered while building an alien prop. These are meant to look like fuel lines, but in reality will strengthen the nacelles by A, creating another attachment point, and B, acting as shock absorbers. To make everything even more secure, I drilled wood screws through the main contact points. Finally, I attached the nose cones. I did this lightly because there was a brief teaser of the Hydra Stomper at the end of the last What If that I watched, and it looked a little bit different, like it had been upgraded over the years, and one of the few differences that I could spot was the nose cones on the thruster nacelles were a little more elongated. So if in the future I decide to update this costume, I want to be able to remove these without causing too much damage. And that was it. That's how I made a jetpack for my Hydra Stomper. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell icon. This video is brought to you by my patrons. Those are the names scrolling by right now. Want to shout out Gabe for increasing his pledge, as well as Jazzman, Lucas, The Good Captain, Montana Reese, and Duba Derp. Great name. Thanks for making me say that. Who came on board from the previous Hydra Stomper builds and helped fast track this one. And if you'd like to join them, it would go a long way towards finishing the whole Hydra Stomper suit. I really don't want to have to recycle the legs from a previous build. I just don't know if it would work. Think they'll notice? Yeah, I think they'll notice. If you're seeing this video before the other Hydra Stomper builds, here's a link to the helmet and the arms. So thanks for supporting me, thanks for watching, happy crafting, and see you later.